You're listening to the Grassroots Church podcast. We're a Jesus-centered community in Thunder Bay, Ontario. You can learn how to participate more by going to our website at grassroots.church. Hi, podcast listeners. We had a few technical issues, so we'll be joining this message a few minutes in. This message is delivered by guest speaker Scott Wiebe because Pastor Steve Bill is away this day. And he starts off by talking a bit about the place he grew up, and we catch him in the middle of that conversation. So now we'll join Scott Wiebe.
I'm sure I've mentioned it before, but it was a deeply religious community. Although I really didn't think of it that way as a kid. We were just the ones who were right, and this is how you lived if you wanted God to be pleased with you. So part of this obedience to God was what happened after high school. It wasn't mandatory, of course, but there was a very strong emphasis on kids going off to Bible college. Kids who chose this path were put in by name in the bulletin in the weeks before school started. And the bulletin was a big deal. It was a full fold-out, often with inserts, and it was like making the news. Anyway, I'd already applied to universities for science programs and received a decent scholarship to come to Lakehead. And in case you're wondering, my second choice was to become a meteorologist, which, if you know me, my top 3 apps are all weather-related. And I would love to talk to you more about that after the sermons. In fact, anyway, we can get into that forever. We're not going there. I follow the weather where my parents live, where my in-laws live. If you go on vacation somewhere cool, I probably will be following what the weather's like where you are. Sorry if that's creepy to you, but that's just kind of the way I work. My friends who live in Smithers, I still follow their weather. Anyway, it's just something I do. Maybe I should have been a meteorologist. Anyway, I was genuinely conflicted that if it was God's plan that I go to secular school. So taking Bible school first was an option, of course, but then I'd forego my entrance scholarships to Lakehead. And being a low-budget Mennonite, that wasn't a deal I was going to pass up. I was finishing up my honors Bachelor of Science in Forestry degree in 2003 as this Bible school, named the Great Commission School, was taking off. And it appealed to me, not only because I was involved with this new startup church, but because it scratched an itch deep inside me to understand the God I felt both compelled and perhaps obligated to follow. Anyway, I enrolled in the Great Commission School for its second full year. We'd gotten married that summer, and if I remember correctly, there were 7 or 8 full-time students and many community members who would attend when they could fit it in. So I have a few embarrassing pictures. Maybe this thing doesn't. Okay, so that's kind of what we were meeting in a house in a large living room. There's some people there that you may recognize. Keep going, John. There's Tim Brown, if he's here. Melissa, if she's here. That's too bad. It's like 20 years. Anyway, she looks the same, so that's good. Next, so Angela and I were married. We were dorm parents to a bunch of girls living in the house with us. We were like all the same age, so it was great being dorm parents to people that your age. And this castle was actually a donation from Chapters. When they were done with it, we put it up in the backyard as our playground for the kids. So we're kind of like that. And if you're wondering about that outfit, John, go to the next one. This is me unironically with a Canadian tuxedo. I'd gotten a job at the research station on Highway 61, and I really wanted to look like a farmer. So this is my farmer's outfit. Anyway, I look back at that time and see so much naivety and mistakes as we tried to grow as a community in the way that we felt God leading us. But I don't count the 10 months it took to read through the Bible together as one of those mistakes. So where are we now, 20 years later? Where does the Bible fit? So I'm going to go through a bit of Megan Good's, a chapter on hers called Reading Backward from her book, The Bible Unwrapped. So when we were in the Great Commission School, going through the Old Testament had its difficulties. when you're reading through verse by verse, you go through literally everything. So there's laws, lists of things, laws of the lists, chronologies that could bore you to death. And perhaps what the Old Testament is most famous for is the violence. So many readers struggle, and if you Google photos of biblical violence, this is one of the tame pictures, so we're just keeping it a little PG here. But it gets, accurate, but grotesque. That's all I have to say. There's worse things you could Google, I'm sure. Many readers struggle with biblical passages that seem to promote extreme violence, implicating God in acts that could be seen as genocide today. These stories challenge us to read the Bible in light of Jesus and the cross. The author of Hebrews, however, notes that God spoke through prophets in the past, but now speaks through Jesus, who reveals God's glory clearly. This clarity gives us an advantage over the past spiritual figures. So before we interpret the Old Testament through Jesus, we should first understand the stories in their original context, aiming for understanding rather than judgment. So we ask, what's at stake for the people at that moment? So we're going to talk about 4 of the pillars, spiritual giants in the Old Testament this morning, and hopefully it comes clear to you, but I appreciated the way that Megan put this together, and it helped me as well. So the first 2 are, we're going to go through the conquest of the city of Jericho, and we sang Jericho is in one of the lyrics this morning, and then the death of the firstborn of the children in Egypt. So really great stuff. So if you're not familiar with the story of Jericho, it's in the book of Joshua. And in Joshua, the Israelites are freed from slavery. They're coming out of Egypt. They're ready to enter, 40 years after, they're ready to enter the promised land. However, they face the challenge of staying loyal to God while surrounded by neighbors with different values. So what happens is, to avoid corruption, they decide to eliminate all these neighbors. And, it's great to sing about that. Right? We're eliminating everybody. By eliminating, I mean killing women, men, children, all of them. And it leads to the devastating conquest of Jericho, all in the name of God. This raises a crucial question. How can they and we resist the temptation to adopt the surrounding culture and stay true to God's unique vision? Moving on, at the start of Exodus, Egypt thrives on slave labor, and Israelite babies are killed to maintain Egyptian privilege. The people cry out for help, questioning if God hears and cares. God confronts Pharaoh to show his power. In this final plague, John 5, yep. Oh, no. Did I miss one? That one. In the final plague, every Egyptian firstborn dies, leading to Pharaoh to freeing the slaves. Despite the horror, the question remains, how should God respond to oppressive powers? Reading these stories forward, the way that we would just look at them and read them, we see questions confronting God's people that are still relevant today. After understanding the stories on their own terms, now we can go through and use our Jesus lenses to read them again. This time, we consider how our answers might change in the light of Jesus and his life, the fullest revelation of God. So reading these conquest stories backward, we recall Jesus' command to love our enemies and his claim that God treats his enemies this way. Doesn't seem like that fits. So the first one is the commander who led Israel to victory in Jericho was Joshua. This is the same name that the angel tells Joseph to give Mary's baby, Yeshua, or Jesus. Jesus, the second Joshua, was born to an oppressed people. His name means the Lord saves, setting an expectation of conquest. However, Jesus commands his followers to put the sword back in Matthew 26 and sacrifices his life to save his oppressors. Even more to note, also interesting is we note Jesus healing a Canaanite's daughter when praising her faith. And this is bonkers to me because Canaan is where Jericho is. And what happened to the people of Jericho in Joshua's time is we killed them all. This one, here Jesus is healing the Canaanite's daughter. And And this is also modern-day Palestine, so it's relevant, it has relevance even to today. And this counters the assumption that the Canaanites would corrupt Israel and turns it on its head for the original hearers of Jesus. The second one, reading the story of Egypt's firstborn death backwards, we see Israelite families protected by the lamb's blood on their door frames. I still remember that, the 1960s. Remember when it would show up on Easter? You had to watch the whole, that show. What was it? The Ten Commandments? Yeah. Anyway. It's kind of boring, but it was really long. That's all I remember. But I do remember the angel of death and the blood on the door frames was one of the only things that stuck out to me. So the lamb's blood on the door frames would cause God to pass over them. And the New Testament calls Jesus the Passover lamb. I know we're going through some of these things, but sometimes reconnecting them helps me figure out why we even have the Old Testament. That's the whole point. But Jesus is called the Passover lamb, whose blood saves all who seek refuge under it. Exodus shows God's protection of Israel, his firstborn child. Jesus, God's firstborn child, son, sacrifices his life to save the guilty. And this is completely the reverse of the Exodus narrative. Jesus is the second Moses, bringing a new Exodus and leading people to freedom. He teaches that the true enemy is sin and death within us, not other nations. His death brings freedom to all who choose it. Okay, we're going to do a bit of a story time now. And this chapter in the book, I don't know, there's just so much relevance right now, so let your imaginations think about how this fits exactly today. So if God hadn't tried it, we might have always wondered. The world was a mess. Leaders lied, bankers stole, and justice was blind. Nations built empires with blood, husbands beat wives, mothers sold children, and brothers betrayed brothers. Even the soil wept. When the world goes to hell, one solution seems obvious. Gather the good people, put them in a bunker, and unleash justice. Wipe out evil. It sounds extreme, but we're kind of having some of that now. But imagine terrorists, traffickers, slumlords, drug lords, pedophiles, corrupt politicians, hedge fund managers, even American hockey fans, all gone. What couldn't we achieve with a clean slate? This is Genesis chapter 6 to 9. God, horrified by humanity, finds one good man, Noah. I told my son the sermon was going to be about him, and he didn't believe me. He's not here to verify that. But anyway, he finds one good man, Noah, and sends him on a cruise while God cleans house. Evil is annihilated, and the fantasy that you and I have sometimes is fulfilled. We step out into a perfect world. No forbidden fruit, no pollution, just us and Noah planting seeds for a new world. So creation 2.0. There we go. Thanks, John. But wait. The very time, as soon as Noah gets out of the boat, what does he do? He celebrates by getting drunk and then cursing his son because he sees him naked laying in his tent. The shame, violence, and greed weren't drowned. They were stowaways on the ark, inside Noah himself. The truth is, defeating evil by deluge only works when no one's on the boat. So what's God to do? The world's still a mess, and the reboot failed. So in this narrative, in the beginning of Genesis, we see that God picks a new partner, Abraham. You can go to the next one there, John. Unlike Noah, Abraham is a middle-aged guy with no kids, although I picked a slide where he had kids. I don't know why. Good old Google. Middle-aged guy with no kids who moves a lot. God chooses him from the dysfunctional masses and promises land, family, fame, and influence. God will bless him so much that it will spill over onto everyone around him. All Abraham has to do is show up and keep his hands open for the gifts. Abraham gathers God's promises and heads to Egypt. Fearing for his life, He asks his wife Sarah to lie and say she's his sister, because Pharaoh's super attracted to his wife. So he's like, that's not my wife. You can have her. So then Pharaoh marries Sarah, and this makes Abraham rich because he's the brother of, well, not brother, but you're following, right? And it makes Abraham rich. But God sends diseases to Pharaoh's household. So Pharaoh's like, this has got to be a mistake. So he sends Sarah back, and Abraham leaves Egypt richer than before, even though he betrayed his wife and all this mess. Abraham's actions show distrust of foreigners, assuming they lack honor. And despite his mistakes, God continues to bless him. Years later, in Gerar, Abraham repeats the same lie, causing more trouble, like with his wife. He does the same thing to his wife again. I don't know, man. That sounds messed up. God intervenes again, rescuing Sarah and then blessing Abraham. This story raises question about God's plan and Abraham's role. Despite the world's mess, God chooses to work through an imperfect person like Abraham. So you might wonder when God's grand new plan will kick in. What kind of story is this? What is God doing with a screw-up like Abraham? How does this answer the global mess? The world was a disaster. Leaders lied, bankers stole, and justice was blind. Nations built empires with blood, husbands beat wives, and mothers sold children, and brothers betrayed brothers. Even the soil wept. Then Jesus came and declared, God causes the sun to rise on the evil and the good. He sends the rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. And in our sense, the rain is a good thing, right? Sometimes we think of rain as the drab days, but that's what we'd look forward to. God is basically being indiscriminate. Goodbye, flood, and farewell, Noah. The problem of evil is answered by indiscriminate mercy. Let's be honest, this sounds like a terrible idea. The world has real problems. We've got trade wars. We've got real other bomb wars. We've got nuclear weapons. We've got clergy abusing power. And let's not even forget about climate change and drowning polar bears, and we can just keep piling it up till it seems so high. We want fire. We want a flood. We want this holy tsunami to break evil in a wave of judgment. But God proclaims that Jesus proclaims that God is emptying the ark, and we're all supposed to come outside under the open sky. We're supposed to stay in the rain until wounds are soothed and stains cleansed, until vision clears and thirst is quenched, until the desert blooms and all things become new. I've never met an unblemished Noah, but I know lots of Abrahams. Chances are you're one, an average person, somewhere between flawed and downright screwed up. Someone who's made mistakes, gotten scared or selfish, and caused wounds. When someone follows Jesus, Christians perform a ritual called baptism. This ritual called baptism is a reminder that God doesn't need Noahs floating high and dry in an ark of righteousness. God is looking for ordinary people who will plunge themselves beneath a flood of Jesus' mercy. And you might wonder if this makes a difference. This whole committing to this and going under the water and all that stuff. Maybe you've made the same mistakes and feel like the same person, only wetter. But consider this detail from Abraham's story. The second time, so he sells his wife, gives his wife away twice. So the second time he does it, just one second. The second time he does it, I have to find the second time he does it. God sends him, when he messes up the second time, God sends him back. And the only way it works out is if he has to pray for those he hurt. And that way, the entire household is healed because Abraham had the courage to make things right. Slowly but surely, Abraham becomes a vessel of God's healing. God causes the sun to rise on the evil and the good. God sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. Jesus calls his disciples to be like him, to be the world's rainmakers. I couldn't think of a better word. Showering these indiscriminate blessings. We rain mercy on those we fear, those across political or ecclesial aisles, our spouses, neighbors, co-workers, friends, and enemies. Noah stepped out of the ark and set the rainbow in the sky And God set the rainbow in the sky as a sign that he's setting down his bow of judgment, never to be repeated. It's just not how God's going to make things right. And the rainbow isn't just a promise, it's a strategy. I love rainbows. If you want to, Angela's favorite color is rainbow. This is the cookbooks in our kitchen are arranged in rainbow order. We have many things in our house that are arranged in rainbow order if you come over and take a closer look. But they're so special. I don't know about you, but when we get a good one, I run out on the street just to take a look at it. And when you get the double going, and you go out on the street, and there's other people on the street too. Like, we're all like in awe of this rainbow. And I just love everything that it represents. I think anyway, maybe when the next time we see one of these, we can think of the piece that this is the symbol of it, right? I love everything it represents now and in the past. It shows that there's hope for a broken world and an end to evil when God's people learn to hang up their bows. Hate and retaliation are not the answer. So I don't know about you, but when I first watched that clip of the polite Canadians booing the national anthem at the Raptors game, I was like, yeah, we're back, baby. Like, this is it. We're going to show them. And I was like full on like amped. I don't watch a lot of sport, as to quote Matt. We just call all things sport. I don't have a vessel to watch sport live. But when that happened, I watched the review, I watched it over again. I'm like, this is it. Like, we got to be booing them. We got to be like into this. And that's only what, 2 weeks ago that happened? And what's happened since then? Like, where's that gotten us? Everyone seems to hate everybody, going beyond booze. We already have all-out brawls at kids' hockey games. And worse, I'm sure. Like, is this helping? This is a silly thing, right? But we can think of this. Is that helping to disrespect another country now? And is that going to help us? I mean, I work in trade from a professional view, trying to work with other countries to bring blah, 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 investment, money, blah, blah, blah. But is that going to help when we try to work together again? Is that going to help? Is that going to make them have good feelings towards us? And do we, anyway, it's just a little thing like this of booing a national anthem, and here we are showing that division, the path of division doesn't work. And as Christians, we have this Bible. Like, this is where I'm going with this. We have this Bible to show over and over and over and over again. It doesn't work. It just doesn't work. So I hope that this helped with these passages. Notice I'm not asking for I didn't go into the historical review or a critique of what is purported to happen. Not that we shouldn't look into those things, but we're trying to look with our Jesus lens. And that's what I'm seeing this morning from what we went through. And I don't know what your experience with the Bible has been. If I'm being honest, I've had many ups and downs in the past 20 years since I went verse by verse through it. The last time I was up here this past November, I talked about why I'm still here, still part of the church, still invested in grassroots, when so much has changed both to myself and to the church. And on reflecting this week, I have the same convictions. I still have the same convictions I had when I was young and zealous, only looks so different. I see God everywhere now if I spend time to look. Just like how we need the Bible with us with a Jesus lens, we need to look around us and celebrate all that is good that is happening inside the church, but especially outside of it. Don't you think that's what Jesus would do? Just like Jesus encountering the Canaanite woman and calling her out for her strong faith, what can we celebrate and build up where we see love and redemption? One of the benefits we have from the Old Testament is that we see backwards all the screw-ups and that arc of redemption. So I'm convinced that grassroots is both part of the great tradition, but also part of our own tradition. I'm convinced that the direction we're headed is one where we seek to see how the world, how Jesus sees it. And it's hard. It's confusing. It goes against our instincts. That's what I'm finding. Like, my instincts are to tribe up. Let's do this thing. Maybe, I'm too old for the army, but, maybe we got something here. it goes against our instincts. I'm convinced that this is what we have here and this whole, this series and everything is a cause worth everything, worth money and effort, because there are deep truths in the answer to the hate, the answer to division, and the answer to hopelessness that we might feel. So let's join together, do good, and be merciful together. And truly, that's what I'm excited about.